things. That's what the Western world is. That's what encourages people to move forward. So, sure, it's good to be have scholarly debate, but it's also good to get the general public interested. So, if some of those guys can sell 1 million copies, that's wonderful. One guy admitted that he sold over 1 million copies of things. Anyway, I can assure you the Dead Sea Scrolls and the First Christians has not sold 1 million copies, so you don't have to worry about that. So, Page and Lee, those guys sell way up there in terms of numbers of books. But they've lost all their money because they did a lawsuit against the Da Vinci Code and lost, and the costs of for having ripped them off, I told you about that, but the cost of a lawsuit in that context is in the £3-4 million area, which is like double in dollars today, just for the legal expenses. I mentioned that last time. Don't go into such things if you can possibly avoid them. I bumped into the back of someone's bumper a couple of weeks ago because I stopped suddenly and I was tired at night. I gave the guy my name. I said, there wasn't any damage. I've had no end of trouble with this guy. He keeps calling, and he won't go to my mechanic, even though I said he'll fix it for. My mechanic said I could fix it for $35. The guy's gotten estimates of thousands of dollars and all these things, just don't anything to avoid going to court with someone. I don't know how to do it, but some people are really insane. They just love to go to court. Okay, so the story of these things you can get in that Dead Sea Scroll Deception book or the Hidden Scrolls books like that. But anyway, because there were 10 or 11 copies of this in the Qumran corpus, when I was National Endowment for the Humanities Scholar in Israel in 1985-86 at the Albright Institute, where the scrolls first came in, I managed to get my hands on a computer printout of all the unpublished scroll fragments. I can't tell how I did that, but someone gave it to me out of a gesture of friendship and guilt, I think. Someone from the Antiquities Authority gave that to me. And my eyes popped out of my head. I couldn't believe it. And I had all the numbers of the Damascus document from the parallel K4 fragments. Now, the K4 fragments never had anything like the completeness of the Cairo document here. So, but what we said in our letter to Strugnell is, we've been waiting 40 years, and you won't even show us the parallels of the Damascus document. They didn't know such a thing would be important to anybody. You won't even show us the parallels so we can know if the Damascus document here is an accurate copy of what was in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Turns out it's totally accurate. Now we know from the fragments. Now that's really important, isn't it? That's what really ticked me off, if I can be honest. That's what made me get into the struggle to free the scrolls. That was the first letter we wrote to John Strugnell. That's in the introduction to this book here, the New Testament Code. I talk about that. But Page and Lee have all that material in their Dead Sea Scroll Deception, how we got into this struggle to free the scrolls. And as I said at one point, if I knew all the scrolls were up at the Huntington Library, facsimiles of them, I never would have gone to Jerusalem to the Albright Institute on a National Endowment for the Humanities Fellowship, because there was nothing I could do there. There was nowhere everybody. I went to different fathers who controlled the editorial process. A guy called Father Benoit was a nice chap. He's since died. I won't say anything negative about people who passed away. He was an elegant person, and there was nothing one could say against him anyway. He was a very sweet fellow. He sent me over. He said he couldn't show us anything. He sent me over to the Museum of the Book, the Israeli Antiquities Authorities. They said they couldn't show us anything, et cetera, et cetera. And one of them even said, "You'll never see the scrolls in your lifetime." So that really set us off, as I told you last time. We said, yeah, well, we will see them. And, not 5 years after he said that to us, all the scrolls were freed. So that's what you can do if you really try to make trouble. If you get in trouble. Our trouble was just passing around documents that no one had ever seen before, that the establishment was keeping to themselves. And when that happened, everything crumbled. And then they decided to open up and publish them all themselves so they could get credit for them.
Did you have photographs that you just had?
I had all the photographs. I had all the photographs, yeah. And that took me about 3 years to get all of the photographs. I'll be honest, some of them I developed right here in the library downstairs. I don't want to upset the library here or anything like that. But I took the negatives in and did the positives of half the pictures in that facsimile edition of the Dead Sea Scrolls that we did. And I told you that story. But yeah, right here at Cal State Long Beach, we did that. And you know, they knew we had all of the pictures, and they knew we were going to publish. So then they ran and they always do that. When we did our survey of the Dead Sea caves, 40 kilometers down the side of the Dead Sea with Cal State students, and so I went into 400 different caves. Then suddenly the Israeli Department of Antiquities decided that they would do a survey of the Dead Sea shores that they'd never done properly before. And the only thing that we really could claim was the thing that Ron and Dennis found, the grave of the righteous teacher that we found 3 or 4 years ago, that I have pictures of in this in this New Testament code. But also 10 years before, we had found this weird looking fort overlooking the Dead Sea, and it's clearly a fort. Rather look at it. Pile of rocks. Those are not new rocks. No one had ever seen that. The Israelis never had that on any of their surveys. My son was the first one up there because he was a billy goat and he loved to climb. He still does. He's crazy about it. You know, he goes to those gyms where you go up the walls and all that kind of thing, and he loves that kind of rock climbing and stuff. But this was great for him. I will say one of our best Israeli people that we worked with, who inspired my son and others because he was so into climbing and jumping and running. He was an immigrant, a Jewish immigrant from Russia, and he was just beautiful. The good always die young. And he went to Russia at some point and was climbing one of the biggest peaks in Russia. After we met him on our expeditions, and there was a landslide, and he died out there. You know. Anyway, my son learned from him, but this is this thing. This is from the veranda of that thing, looking out here to the Kidron. This is the Kidron, which goes up to Jerusalem. It's the valley next to the Temple Wall, goes all the way down to here, and it empties out here into the Dead Sea. And there's a wharf down here. Right here is that wharf. That was